right, so we're going to get started, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. So today, inshallah, we'll be covering the 32nd word in Imam Nursi's The Words. So last week, last couple of weeks, we were reading the 20th letter, which covered 11 phrases. So these phrases are listed here as well, but I'll go ahead and read them out, I guess first in Arabic. So La ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah, lahul mulk wa lahul hamd, ويحيي ويميت وهو حي لا يموت بيده الخير وهو على كل شيء قدير وإليه البصير. So there is no God but one. He is one. He has no partner. His is the dominion and his is the praise. He grants life and deals death and is living and dies not. All good is in his hand. He is powerful over all things, and with him all things have their end. So we made it up to he has no partner. So that was what the discussion was over last week. So in those discussions, we were going through these first couple of phrases and discussing, there is some cure or good news in these phrases, and we're talking about sort of what is the benefit in knowing and reflecting on these phrases. And so the last phrase we were reflecting on was he has no partner. And so here we're going to go through the 32nd word, which provides, I guess, more of an allegorical example of what it means by he has no partner. But I guess before that, does anyone want to share any important reflections from last week or summaries? It's okay. So I was asking if anyone wants to share anything from last week that they felt really stuck with them, any summaries. Otherwise we can get started in reading the 32nd word. First. Go for it.
So very briefly, so the question, so last week when we were studying La Sharika Lah, we talked about the outcomes of it, or the glad tidings that he has no partner has. But when it comes to the justification part of it, the author said the 32nd word is the best explanation, justification for there's no partner to him. So this is why we are now switching to the 32nd word as a justification for how do we know, or what does it mean that he doesn't have any partner? So how can I understand this? So this text is specifically for that purpose. And as we will see, it's written in common people's language, nothing fancy really, but he is making us again go through the creation, day-to-day things that we are interacting with to bring us to the point that he has no partners.
I think the two main things that we talked about last time were the first one was about how if Allah said wahdahu, why is there still the need to say la sharika lah? And the answer to that we found in the text, which was that even when you have a monarch who is ruling over everything, he still needs partners, officials to execute the commands he wants to. And la sharik basically means that he doesn't need anybody to do all of that. And I think then we also had some discussion about why angels are there and that sort of thing, which I'm not going to get into. But actually I could. So Zarar asked the question of why was Jibril needed to bring down the Quran? Why was the Prophet needed if Allah can do everything himself? And we basically talked about how that was again a top-down approach, and we need to look at things from from our perspective. Did we need the prophet to talk to us? Was he relevant to help us understand revelation, help us see the manifestation of God, which was he himself. So there was that idea. And then the other thing that we talked about, the other main thing we talked about was how everyone can have recourse to him directly, and how that is like very good news for us. Birkan said that if you keep asking people who are not God for help, you will create distance between you and God. And that I thought was something very important, and that stuck with me. So yeah, those are some of the things.
Cool, thank you. Does anyone else want to share anything? Or okay, otherwise we can get started on the 32nd word. And I think we're reading the first stopping place today. Are we reading the whole? Okay. Okay.
Might be too lengthy. There are multiple pages. I don't know if
Right.
separated by explicit stages.
All right.
Whoever's going to read can start reading and you can stop whenever you finish.
Yeah. Okay. That's good. Anyone want to read? All right, Atik.
So I'm going to start at one night in Ramadan. Okay. One night in Ramadan, I said that the above sentence affirming divine unity consists of 11 phrases, and that in each of them is a degree expressing that unity and some good news. But of those degrees, I only discussed the meaning and significance of he has no partner. And that was in the manner of an allegorical conversation and imaginary debate that would be accessible to ordinary people. I am now writing down that conversation at the request and desire of my much valued brothers who assist me and my friends from the mosque. It is as follows. Let us suppose one person represents all those things set up as partners to God, and that all the different varieties of idolaters imagine to exist. These idolaters are the people of unbelief and misguidance who worship nature and causes, for example, and assign partners to God. The fictitious person wants to have mastery over one of the beings in the universe and so claims to be its true owner. Firstly, that maker of false claims encountered a particle, which is the smallest of those beings, and he spoke to it in the language of naturalism and philosophy, saying that he was to be its master and true owner. But the particle replied to him with the tongue of truth and dominical wisdom, saying, I perform innumerable duties, entering many creatures which are all different. I do my work in them, and there are, from among countless particles like me, those that move from place to place and work with me. If you have knowledge and power to employ me in all those duties, and the authority and ability to employ and have at your command all those others as well, and if you are able to be the true owner of and to have total control over the beings of which I become a part of in complete order, become a part in complete order. For example, over the red blood corpuscles, then you can claim to be master over me and ascribe me to something other than God Almighty. But if you cannot do all these things, be silent. And here's a footnote. Indeed, every object which is in motion, from minute particles to the planets, displays on itself the stamp of eternal besottedness and unity. Also, by reason of its movement, each of them takes possession of all the places in which it travels in the name of unity, thus including them in the property of its own owner. As for those creatures that are not in motion, they are each of them, from plants to the fixed stars, like a seal of unity, showing the place in which it is situated to be the universe, to be the missive of its own maker. That is to say, each flower and fruit is a stamp and seal of unity, which demonstrates in the name of unity that its habitat and native place is the missive of its maker. In short, each thing takes possession of all things through its motion in the name of unity. That is, one who does not have all the stars within his grasp cannot have mastery over a single particle. Back to the text. And in the same way that you cannot have mastery over me, you cannot interfere in any way. For there is such complete orderliness in our duties and motion that one who does not have infinite wisdom and all-encompassing knowledge cannot meddle with us. If he did, it would cause chaos. However, a person like you who is thick, impotent, and unseeing and is in the clutches of blind chance and nature could not even begin to stretch out a finger to interfere. So just like the materialists, the one making these claims said, in that case, own yourself. Why do you say you are working on someone else's account? To which the particle replied, if I had a brain like the sun and all-embracing knowledge like its light and all-encompassing power like its heat and comprehensive senses like the 7 colors in its light, and if I had a face that looked to all the places in which I travel and all the beings in which I work, and an eye that looked to them, and words that carried authority with them, then perhaps I would indulge in foolishness like you and claim to own myself. Get out, go away, you won't get anything out of me.
I
So
think that's a good
okay.
stopping place. Jazakallah khair.
I speak like a robot. It's a hard test.
Yeah, so this is the example of this fictitious person who represents all the idols in our lives talking to a particle. And so it's sort of, as we go on, this person is talking to higher and higher order things, but we can stop with his, for now, with his conversation with this particle. So firstly, did anyone have any initial reactions to the text and anything that was interesting or confusing? Yes, Brother Birkan.
So one thing which struck my attention, probably he like on purpose, Brother Yusuf said this at the very beginning. This text is written so that an ordinary people would understand, right? An author says in the text, and that was in the manner of an allegorical conversation, just like we read, like as if one person talking to another person. An imaginary debate that would be accessible to ordinary people. On contrast, when he talks about the person which personify, all these idolaters, everything that are set up as partners to God and so on, he speaks in the language of naturalism and philosophy. So to contrast, author says, I will talk so that ordinary people like Yusuf would understand, right? But when it comes to the idolaters, he or she speaks in a language that would only Qadir would understand, with his expertise in philosophy, the natural sciences and so on. He would use all this jargon instead of saying that, oh, do you know what? This creates that. He wouldn't speak that way, but he says, oh, this action is governed by such laws which, emerge as all this fancy language that we keep using when we write papers. So that's one contrast I found very interesting. We will, discuss more in deep detail for sure, but maybe one thing to highlight.
Yeah, so in here, there's this conversational language is going on as I'm now looking at the second paragraph. Let us suppose one person represents all those things set up as partners to God that all the different varieties of idolaters imagine to exist. What does he mean by that? He explains. These idolaters are the people of unbelief and misguidance who worship nature and causes, for example, and assign partners to God. So he's not talking about the Meccan idolaters where we imagine they're worshiping some statues and whatnot. He says, whomever are ascribing partners to God, this is what he's talking about. And he's saying that let's imagine one person who represents this ideology, as if he's saying that all of them are, at the end of the day, comes down to the same thing, which is ascribing partners to God. One might be saying that it is, chance. The other one might be saying that, it is causes or natural laws and this and that. He says at the end of the day, all boils down to one common thing, which is the existence is being governed by multiple entities. So ascribing partners. So that's why author says, let's imagine one person who's doing that. And this fictitious person wants to have mastery over one of the beings in the universe. So just wants to say that I made this, I created this. So claims to be its true owner. So I guess the question here is this really the case? Is this too fictitious, or do we really see that this is the point? Like when we say, gravity does this, or things like that. So do we really see what the author in here is trying to depict?
So just to add up what Yusuf already said, when we usually have such discussions with people, it doesn't matter what they think, what they believe, or what we think, what we believe. It usually goes like, I'm not talking about who create things. I'm not talking about, the God and so on. This is not what I'm interested in. I'm just trying to study, how my body works. This is a very common excuse or common, let's say, the argument, right? What are you talking about? Are you just denying the existence of the natural laws? It goes. So author here says, no matter what language is being used by you or by someone else, don't imagine an external person like a British professor who's atheist trying to claim something. Like think about yourself, your conversations with your family. Something happens, okay? And then you are sad. Somebody comes and tells, oh, don't worry, there's God. And you say, what are you talking about? I have a problem here. Let's solve this, right? So we also do the same thing. So author here is saying that no matter what language is being used, what claim is being made, when you look at it, you will always see that it is actually about who creates what. It always boils down that. Who controls what? And I think this is like, if we can understand this conversation, it means we master, the very fundamental thing in Iman. So I think this conversational, the dialogue or example is extremely important.
Yeah, I guess adding on to that, it is an allegorical example here, but I guess when I was initially reading it, I guess one of the ideas was maybe to be able to see that conversation in ourselves. So at the end of the day, this has to be something that's relevant to us and like help us see sort of, why la sharika lah, or why he has no how we're able to like confirm that he has no partner. So I guess taking it to another level is, I guess, do I see myself like trying to claim ownership over things like in my life, I guess, and can I prove to myself that no, the I don't actually have control over the events in my life. And I think the statement in the footnote really struck me. That is one, the very last sentence, that is one who does not have all the stars within his grasp cannot have mastery over a single particle. So I remember reading that and feeling like, wow, okay, so I definitely don't have mastery over this particle. And I think this conversation really like strongly emphasizes that I have no control over where an atom will go. But I guess it does have a specific movement and path that isn't random. Like things move in a certain way in certain like created things. So atoms make up other things and eventually makes up universes and galaxies and so on. So I guess I just was wondering I was just wondering, I feel like I can confirm that, but what are some, I guess, examples in my everyday life where this debate kind of where I would think about this like debate, and do I think about this debate, I guess, is a question. Right.
I have a question before her question. So yeah. So like, but how do I confirm the fact that he who has no control over all the stars cannot have control over all the particles? Because intuitively, like,
I can get the first part.
so like, how do I confirm the fact that he who does not have mastery over all the stars and everything does not have mastery over a single particle? Because intuitively, like, I cannot control the weather when the sun or the moon rises, but I can pick my phone up and put it somewhere else, or here, or like throw it away. Like I have some sort of control. So intuitively feels like that feels like an intuitive contradiction. Like to have control over a single thing, you have control over everything, or you have nothing. So how do I confirm that and like at least make intuitive sense of that?
Before I pass to you, maybe that author gives for another reason, but I guess we can apply it to here as well. Ali, he wants to do something, he wants to reach something, for instance, he cannot, and he asks his father, Father, can you give to me? And because father loves his son, he does everything he wants, he just gives it. And then Ali asks, oh, Father, now, let's walk me there, like carry me, hug me, walk me there. And then father takes there. And then he says, oh, that's not enough, Father. Now give me some fruit and then feed me. And he does it. So he asks, and then it is done for some reason. But obviously, we know that Ali doesn't have any control over Yusuf. He just asks, and he does it out of mercy. And for instance, with your relationship with government, let's say, when you ask in a certain way, for instance, when you feel a certain form, the answer is always given in a certain way, and it's always given. And forget about, let's say, some exceptions. Does it mean that you have control over this process and the government and so on? Or is it just for some reason government decided if you ask in a certain way, he will, it will, whatever, she will give it to you always and in a certain way. It won't change. So the same thing, you ask every time you pick it up, like every time you want to pick it up, you see that it is being picked. And then when every time when you want to put it down, you see that it's being put down. So the question is it any different than the previous examples? Because with the previous examples, you know that he doesn't control. You know that you don't control government. Even though every time you do it in a certain way, like you ask in a certain way, the response is always given in a certain way. But you still don't think that you have a control. So then you should ask the same question, like, do I really have a control when I pick this up? What happens actually? So with these stars, I was imagining like a visualization, like you have some dots, let's assume, and you want to move one dot. And you know that within the universe, when you move one dot, actually everything around it moves. And because everything else is around other, like things that moves, actually the entire universe is moving to some extent, right? So just one movement of one particle means a change in the entire universe. We know that. So you ask the question, yes, I feel like, I have control over it, but do I really have control over it? Or is it just the fact that every time I ask, it's being given in a certain way?
And the answer to Zara's question will be the entire text. Like actually that footnote is a summary of, he quotes, it starts with the particle. Gradually it will go from particle to cell to human body and whatnot. At the end, it comes to the stars. And at every stage, the main theme of the text is, let's say this idolater will say that I'm going to be your Lord, let's say to the particle will say that you cannot be and this and this and that, and say you cannot have any control over me. But if you can have control over what I am part of, which is the cell, then I'm going to accept your mastery. So he sends this idolater to the cell. Cell sends it to human body sends it to all the way to the stars. So they say you cannot control me because of such and such and such reason, but yet if you can control what is above me because I am part of this more complex structure, then you can have control over me. Therefore, because of this, if you like, daisy chaining, if you cannot control a particle, you cannot control a star, or whomever cannot control a star cannot control a particle, would become the necessary conclusion. So that first sentence in the footnote is a summary of the entire text, actually.
Because you said intuitively, yes, we have this sense of control. Like we cannot deny it. So any explanation must also explain this experience that we have. Like I feel like I control it. And as you said, you feel that you can control it without controlling everything else, right? So this intuitive understanding, like let's say the initial understanding is there for sure. And it needs to be also explained. But I guess the question is, when you feel you are in control, are you really in control or not? So that's the question. So which reminded me a perfect scene from a movie. Sorry. The Batman, the third one, the new the third one with the Bane, you know it? So the Bane is the bad guy, but he's like really charismatic, okay? And he's really powerful. He has a mask and so on. Anyway, it doesn't matter. So a tiny guy who hires him to install some explosives and so on around the city. And then something goes bad and this tiny guy who's a business guy, right? He thinks he's in control of Bane because every time he wants something, Bane does it, right? And then one day, as I said, everything goes bad. This tiny guy starts shouting at the Bane, this huge guy. What are you doing? You have to, answer me. You have to do this. You have to do that. And he's just shouting. And all Bane does, just put his hand. I love this scene. Just put his hand like this. Just hold it there and ask the question, do you think you are like you have the control? And then guy said, no. So yet like up until this point, he thought he had control because every time he wants, it happens. Just like, up until, may God forbid, up until you have a stroke, let's say, or something happens to your arm. The object is heavier than you thought, whatever. Up until this moment, you always think you are under control, like you have the control. But then Bane puts his hand on your shoulder and just ask, do you have the control? Fortunate to us, we have a merciful one who has the control. So there's no squeaky sound, when the scene changed, the guy's neck is broken. But anyway, but I guess from an intuitive point of view, yes, we have this sense that we have in control. And we should ask the question, am I in control or am I just being given?
I guess I'll add in. So I guess another interesting kind of feature of this dialogue that I found was, first after asking the particle, or I guess not asking the particle, but saying that I am to be your master. And then the particle says, no, you don't have any control over me. I do all these things and you don't have the power to, or it's asking, do you have the power to direct any of my movements? And the answer, I guess, would be no. But then it kind of jumps to sort of this this figure that's the symbol of the sort of the idolaters, then asks, why would you say that you are working on someone else's account? In that case, own yourself. So I guess going to the Batman example, Bane, I haven't seen the movie, so I'm just going completely on what you said. So it would be like then Bane. So I'm in that example, I'm guessing Bane already knew who his owner was or whatever. But the question then becomes sort of like, why do you not own yourself? So I guess that's kind of interesting. Like, it's the question is, do we have control over something? Because it's like we assume that it's something that must be controlled, but then instead of going from, oh, we don't control it, so something else must, we go from, we don't control it, so it must control itself. So I guess I was just thinking of sort of why that jump is made from me or someone else, me being in control over something versus that thing just doing whatever it wants, I guess. I can't come up with a concrete example, but if anyone else wants to share something. Okay.
No.
Oh. Yeah.
I don't have any Could we go over what eternal besottedness means in the footnote, and could we also go over what it means to, so it says, in short, each thing takes possession of all things through its motion in the name of unity, in the second last sentence. Those are two things that I'm.
What's the second thing?
The first thing I'm asking is what eternal besottedness means. That's in the second line. And the second thing I'm asking is what this means. In short, each thing takes possession of all things through its motion in the name of unity.
So actually, I would suggest slowly going through that paragraph. And also the footnote, let's go through them. And while doing that, we should also question whether those idolaters, do they really make such a claim or not, just to make sure that author is not simply telling us a story, but he's just simplifying what is happening with the tongue of philosophy. Maybe it happens with a more complicated language in your biology and chemistry class, but actually it boils down to what's being said in here. Because the footnote is going to be an expansion of the text itself, that paragraph, but we can read the paragraph to just dissect it into pieces.
You're done. So just maybe one example we can, while reading the text, we can think of about your question. So for instance, when we studied rain, right, we said how it comes down, and Zarar says, oh, because there's the law of something. And then Yusuf says, yeah, but it's just the law, it's an abstraction, it's nothing, it's like an instruction on a paper, so it cannot do anything. So the first claim was the law of gravity, whatever the discussion is. Law of gravity owns it. Law of gravity controls it. That was the first claim. And then Yusuf says, but it's just an instruction on paper. What are you talking about? Like, it cannot control anything. And Zara says, oh, yeah, that's true. But how it comes down, well, it's coming down by itself. Like you can apply to, because it's talking about the particles, the atoms. How, like when two electrons comes together, they propel each other, right? You ask how they move this way, not why, how, okay? How they move this way. And the first answer is, oh, because there is this, whatever, law of the electrical charges and whatever and so on. And then you say, it doesn't make sense, like it cannot control it. So you still, continue asking how this electron moves. That's what I'm asking. And then the Zarar says, oh, electron just moves itself. Like this is what electron is. It just moves itself. So that's one example comes to mind.
That sounds good. Okay, so I guess if there are no other comments, we can do a deeper dive sort of into this, into these paragraphs. Sorry, Yusuf, were you saying like the whole, like going back through the whole thing or just the footnote? Okay. So I'll just read this paragraph. I perform innumerable duties, entering many creatures which are all different. I do my work in them. And there are, from among countless particles like me, those that move from place to place and work with me. If you have the knowledge and power to employ me in all those duties, and the authority and ability to employ and have at your command all those others as well, and if you are able to be the true owner of and to have total control over the beings which I become a part of which I become a part in complete order, for example, over red blood corpuscles, then you can claim to be master over me and ascribe me to something other than God Almighty. But if you cannot do all these things, be silent.
I mean, since it's going to be a repeating pattern, maybe just dissecting this one and then we can continue doing it. So here the particle is claiming certain things. That's the first thing is particle says you cannot be my owner. But what are the reasons for that? So he starts saying, I perform innumerable duties, like a particle, which is you can take if you like a water molecule. Let's say we are taking a water molecule. Says the water molecule says, I do innumerable duties, entering many creatures which are all different. I do my work in them. Like that water molecule, if I drink it, it becomes part of me. If Zarar drinks it, it becomes Zarar. If that tree drinks it, it becomes the tree. If, I don't know, if an animal drinks, if a bacteria drinks, wherever that water molecule goes, it functions properly according to that body. So that particle is saying that, look, this is what I am doing. Do you agree with that? Is this the case? Yes, like wherever that water molecule goes, it functions properly. And in addition to this, there are other particles like me, and I cooperate with them at the same time. Water molecule, or like if you would like to take it as oxygen, let's take an oxygen. I breathe in, so that it's a particle. I breathe in oxygen or Zarar or anybody. Then he says, the particle says, whenever I see a hydrogen, I become something else. Whenever I see a carbon, I become something else. Like in collaboration with them, I do certain other things. So we are working in harmony with other particles that are like me. So this is the second dimension in which can you fulfill this as well? But what does that mean? Can you fulfill this? Because we need to understand that manifestation is happening over there. And now you need to come up with an explanation for that. How come that water molecule works in me and also works in Dua, which has a different personality and everything, and in Zarar, and in an, I don't know, like a fly and a alligator and whatnot. All of them, that water molecule works. The explanation that you come up with, or idol ladder, or the ascriber of partners, does it provide an explanation to that? Does it sound reasonable or sounds too abstract? What do you think so far? If it is sounding a little too abstract, let me give you another example. So as if it is saying that Qadir, he graduated from mechanical, so mechanical engineer. But Qadir goes to Apple, which doesn't produce any mechanics yet. He perfectly functions in that company. Goes to Tesla, functions perfectly in there. No training needed. He just goes into the company. The next day, he starts working perfectly, seamlessly, works in car production. Goes to Apple, seamlessly works in this Google production. Goes to Samsung, seamlessly starts working in cell phone production. So wherever he goes, he performs many different duties. So how can you explain this miraculous success of Qadir? If you can say that, well, Qadir is a genius, it's not even enough to explain genius, because he apparently knows all the projects across the globe, all companies are possibly doing. If this is your explanation as to explaining the success of Qadir, so this is the question that the particle is asking here. I do function everywhere in multiple different, wherever I go, I function seamlessly. If you say it happens by chance, if you say it happens by law, if you say it happens by nature, whatever, does it explain that level of knowledge? Where does this come from? Because I am functioning, that knowledge is being observed. So are you going to ascribe it to whatever? Because still we didn't come to you own yourself. Because eventually it will say the part that you said, but I think didn't read that part yet. The part idolater will say that, well, we don't own you, but meaning it's not controlled by nature, by not this, by not that, but it's going to be you own yourself, meaning you know everything. Would this work? So does the this what's it, allegorical language, do you see the parallelism between this and what we believe in? Because it sounds, it's overly so much simple, but the concept that's being discussed is so substantial. And actually, this is also showing how, I would say, funny the scientific or philosophical, whatever you would like to call it, claims over particles management or governing, what governs particle. Or we say such and such law governs particles, such and such chance or such and such nature. So the particle is challenging this. Look, I go everywhere, I function perfectly. Does your explanation really explain what's going on in here? This is one aspect. The second aspect is I work in collaboration with other particles too. Now it becomes a compounded problem. Initially, it was me knowing everything. Me knowing all the projects, if you like, in all companies. Kadir knowing all the projects in all the companies on earth. But now a further complication comes. Kadir is working with other people in these projects as well. It's not only he knows the project, he also knows the other people, what other people are doing and everything. So it's not like briefly, I know everything about that project, but I know what Zerrin is going to bring into the table, and seamlessly and without any argument, I'm going to work with Zerrin as well. Like Kadir atom, now you're an atom, a particle, is going to be, because this is being demonstrated, we do observe this happening. So how do you explain this? It says, this is what I'm manifesting, but whatever you claim, nature, laws and whatnot, does it explain that phenomena? And there was a third. Okay, then the third thing is, and if you are able to be the true owner of and to have total control over the beings of which I become a part in complete order, for example, over red blood corpuscles. It says you cannot simply be my owner and get done. You also need to be the controller and owner of what I'm becoming a part of. Because, and this is what we have been discussing in the previous parts. We are not looking at a frozen and isolated simple thing. The existence is so much intricate, and the particle is now bringing that to the conversation, saying that even if you somehow were able to, in isolation, own me, look, I am becoming part of another thing. Are you going to be able to own that as well? Simply owning me doesn't mean much, because the existence is so much interconnected. This is why eventually it will become that in order to be the owner of a particle, you need to be the owner and controller of a star, because the whole galaxy, the whole existence is made up of those particles. Moving one means moving the star. Without being able to move the stars, you cannot move a single particle. So these three major arguments that the particle makes.
Can you list? No. Can you list three? Just giving the name again.
Okay, the first one is I enter many creatures which are all different. I do work in them.
Okay.
Second is
I work with others.
among countless particles like me, from place to place, we move together.
Okay.
And the third one is, if you can control whatever I become part of, then you can claim ownership over me, like a red blood corpuscle. So the particle says, if you can govern what is above me in terms of organizational structure, if you like, then you can control me. If not, you cannot. And then in the footnote, he starts talking about a property of particles, like by their movement, every particle points to their maker. And by being stationary, in another sense, particles point to the creator, which is another discussion. We can get to there, the footnote, but let's get done with this 3 items if it's clear. If any questions there are about this, then we can discuss the
I have a
footnote.
question. I have a challenge for that. So when we say, you know, with the example of Kadir, for instance, by the way, it's a bad example because Kadir can do everything you listed. That's one thing. But let's assume with Zarar. Zarar cannot do, that's obvious. So with this example, what Zarar needs to do or Kadir needs to do, it's very complicated, like in every company. But when it comes to particle, and this is how this naturalism works, instead of try to explain these complex things, we say, okay, let's look at in detail, and can we find a simple basis that will explain these complex things in above, right? If we can find a very simple thing when we look at in deep, then we don't have to explain the complexity above. So with the particle, for instance, wherever it goes, whether it's part of Zarar or this, what is it, the car, toy, it does the same thing. It doesn't, need to know anything. It just moves, vibrates. And because we can, put all these vibrations together, which, becomes another thing, and then this another thing come together, becomes another thing. You don't need to, like when you give such an example, for instance, I can say that no, particle doesn't need to know anything about Apple or, this company, that company, because all it does is just vibrate. That's all. Vibration.
So, any comments? Okay, I can.
I'm still struggling with this. So like for my senior design project, we worked on this machine and, we're 4 engineers working on a different part of the machine. We're 4 engineers working on a different part of the machine. And let's just say I worked on one subsystem. Now that subsystem works with other systems. And I do not have complete knowledge of like the intricate details of what's happening in the electrical parts and stuff. I was only responsible for the mechanical design, just design the gears and make sure it works. So it was working perfectly with the other machine. Like the gear was supposed to work and the gear did work. I didn't have any knowledge of the electrical components of the motors working, how the motor's going to drive the gear and everything. But so what I'm saying is like in the entire system, I did have control over one design, the control over design of just one part, and the machine did work. So intuitive, again, coming back to the intuitive thing. So I don't understand how I needed to know every single detail about the machine because I didn't know how the PCB was working. I didn't know how the microcontroller was working or what the program was. I just know like this is what the mechanical function is. This is how the gear is supposed to work. This is what the gearing ratio needs to be, and the machine will work. So like even if I have not complete, but the required knowledge of just one part, that part can do its job perfectly well in that machine.
So this is why the example in here is saying that look at the particle. That particle, like you only worked in one portion of it, right? Mm-hmm. So it says, but you, in the example, that particle is not only working in one place, it goes to everywhere and it keeps working. So how do we explain this? It's not like we are in a world in which there's one Zarar, it's born in Pakistan in a certain house, lives in that house forever, dies in that house, and lives a decent life and whatnot. Saying that Zarar goes from Pakistan to New Zealand to America to Britain, and wherever it goes, it perfectly functions. This is the type of particle we are talking about. This is the example. Like in your example, you're talking about, I'm looking for a specific part and it seems to be working. So it's saying that, no, let's look at the particle, how it is functioning, and we are trying to explain that particle. It's moving everywhere. it's perfectly functioning in everywhere. How do I explain that phenomena? So the example is different than your case. And again, this is very beautifully starting from the existence. It's saying that this is the thing in front of us. The particle goes everywhere, perfectly functions everywhere, and works in harmony with everything else, still perfectly functions. And it becomes part of a compound, and in that compound, it still perfectly functions. How do we explain these three aspects? Would chance, would nature, would this, would that, or as Birkan was saying, just a simple vibration, would it explain? Like for Birkan's question, for example, that would mean if we apply to our case, because we can simplify to that level, go to any company right now, all that people want to know is how to hit, let's say there's an expert of hitting A, expert of hitting B, expert of hitting C, but they don't know anything else. All they know is hitting A. So would you ever expect a meaningful book, for example, being written by people who only know how to hit A? Because interconnectedness in this case means, when am I going to hit A? Shall I hit A before the other guy hits B and whatnot? This is why it says I am working in harmony with everywhere else. Even if we take just this first part, wherever you go, it's the same thing you do. Just you hit A. When am I going to hit A? Because now that we are doing it in harmony, so that means in a sense, in that example, all the companies right now, let's take the example of humans today, there's no brain, no understanding, no nothing. It is just mechanical, like there's no engineer, no wisdom, no nothing. It's just people hitting A's and B's. And then all those giant softwares, let's say Microsoft Windows and this and that, are coming into being by people who only knows how to write a single letter. So this is the type of thing that he is saying in here. Working in harmony, same thing, going and working in multiple places. How do I explain that phenomena? And to explain that phenomena, we should also think about what are the potential answers that are being given. Like Birkan gave one of them as a hypothetical case. And I guess the chemistry version of that would be, oh yeah, oxygen burns. That's what oxygen always does. It always burns. It has this specific nature. So wherever oxygen goes, it says, oh, okay, I'm going to burn or whatever. I mean, I'm just making it up. So would this suffice to explain the existence? That wherever oxygen goes and works, plus wherever oxygen collaborates with other particles and make different things, and wherever oxygen become parts of a larger compound, how do we explain this meaningful manifestation that's happening over there? Does this make sense?
This remembered, like it reminded me a book from a famous stupid guy. Doesn't matter who it is. He was saying that, you know, the people thinks that this type of whatever he's talking about, I'm not giving any clue, that it cannot happen by you know, the random chance. He was saying that, right? They don't know how to program things. Like he was saying that the just other day I wrote a Java code. Doesn't matter what Java is. I wrote a Java code in which you know, when you apply some rules and define some criteria about the fitness, it just randomly picks, you know, some numbers and so on, letters. And then just by randomly, you know, generating things and then applying this fitness criteria and so on, it can come up with this specific word, just out of random, he was saying. And so he says, just like I said, you know, it's just vibrations. or your example, I just know one single part. The trick here, this the magic here, is that you have actually a very, let's say, a comprehensive knowledge that the meaning of this word, the meaningful word, and the guy is saying that it can come with a random process. Again, the trick is just showing you one thing, the program, and show that it works, and it's randomly generating letters. And then says, you see, it's nothing. But it is actually, he is actually hiding the fact that he wrote a code. He thought about it. He come up with some criteria. He come up with some rules and then implemented them. Exactly. So he enforces, meaning, this computer needs to generate it. He gives the power and all these things. Everything, which are the most important parts, the hidden behind the scenes, and all we see software generating random letters. Where did you come up with this software? So somebody needs to think about it. Like there's a comprehensive knowledge, right? Which is not even mentioned. With your example, so it would be a meaningful, like a counterexample, for instance, if you, whatever you are doing, without communicating anyone else, one day you wake up and say to yourself, you know what, I will generate such gears. Why? Well, I want this way. And I want these gears to be exactly this way, right? You just do it. And then Kadir wakes up and says that, you know what, for some reason, I will, generate these other type of gears, whatever. And then you show me that you just know about your part. He knows about only his part, and there's no other knowledge in place. And then they come together, gives this machine. That's not the case. Somebody had to think, right, about the machine, the entire machine. Maybe you don't have it now, you don't have the knowledge, but knowledge is still there. You have to explain this knowledge. Somebody had to think about it, the entire machine. Somebody even had to think how to divide it. So it's more than entire machine. In your example, for instance, so your claim as a magician, you're trying to treat me, just showing me a small portion of the knowledge and say that it's enough. But actually, in your example, there is more knowledge than the entire machine. Because it's machine plus have to divide tasks into engineers, plus have to manage them, plus have to train them. You are trained, right? Plus have to make these gears work and so on and so forth. You claim that we don't need a comprehensive knowledge of the machine, but actually you are saying that we have more than it, more than what you just said. So this is a very, a common trick that we always being fooled with. So with his examples, for instance, like we say that, oh, it's just simple vibration. Everything, explained with like a tiny knowledge. Wait a second. Where did you come up with this vibration? And how do you explain the single vibration, whatever it is, like oxygen burns or something vibrating? How do you explain such a perfect vibration, which is exactly what we need to see this observed, the universe? So it seems that knowledge is still there, the entirety of the universe. And then design it in a way, just a single vibration can be a building block of this entire universe. So it's more than the entire universe again. So when we say that a single molecule of particle just vibrates, what we are referring to, more than entire universe. Entire universe designed in such an elegant way that it's tiny, the rule, whatever it is, will help the rest, just like, dividing your task into two different engineers. So the knowledge is more than entire universe, not just a single vibration. No.
Okay.
It's like a really simple.
Lawrence kind of said something similar. So. Hamza Ford. I don't know. I pronounce it right. Yeah, that guy.
I don't like debates.
So I was thinking about the part that stuck me most was the one where it says that if you have the knowledge and power to employ me in all those duties. So if you truly control something and you truly are the owner of it or the controller of it, you then have the power to employ it in all its different duties and faculties or whatever. And I was thinking about like something that we think we truly own, because I don't think in this day and age, we really think, like, we're not arrogant enough to be like, I am God. Or at least I haven't heard that from anybody. People do have God complexes, but nobody outrightly claims it, at least. But what do we think that we truly own? And I think it's our thoughts. We truly feel like we own the thoughts that come in our head. And then I was thinking that unless and until we control our thoughts to the maximum extent, or like to the full extent in all their duties and all their faculties, we can't truly control them. And that got me thinking of dreams and how we don't control the dreams that we have. And if we don't really have true control over the dreams and our mind is, thinking on its own or whatever, then that means that we aren't the true masters or the controllers of our thoughts. So, yeah.
A naturalist would say, though,
Yeah.
You cannot control your dreams, but actually you cannot control your dreams because they are controlled by what you eat, or what you did in that day, and so on. So there is always a claim, just like we read here. Okay, I cannot control. Okay, own yourself. The same thing. Okay, you cannot control your dreams. That's true. But let's assume what you eat controls them. So, yeah.
Just to clarify, the claim in here is not saying that a person, an atheist professor, claims that I own the particle. This is just saying that just to make it more figurative and more concrete, as if particle speaks to a man, but a man in here is actually representing naturalism or evolution. Like in here, what claims mastery over a particle is, let's say, natural selection. So particle is challenging the idea of natural selection in this conversation. Because as, for example, what Birkan was giving as an example, so the guy is saying that randomly generating something, and then there happens a natural selection. Like there's this fitting criteria. Something that doesn't fit this is being eliminated. So this sounds so natural to us, but like if I were to ask Ali to, like if I put multiple, let's say, strawberries, what is natural for him to pick? The good ones or the rotten ones? He doesn't know. Like, since he's not trained for picking the good ones or the bad ones, for Ali, all of them are the same. When we say natural selection, we imagine some sort of a mechanism or a choice maker which says this is not fit for living, this is fit for living, or fit for continuation. Where's this coming from? Like in the idea of natural selection for life. This is fit for life, this is not fit for life. What decides this? Because now there's no central authority. What we are right now discussing is there's no central authority. You cannot imagine such a thing. In the absence of such a central authority, and you cannot say, oh, this law of life, there's no law. Laws are not choice maker. As long as there is a choice being made, and in this case, it's natural selection, but what is it that makes that selection? Based on what is this selection being made? That's why in that example, I was saying that in this code, there's this fit criteria. So you make a choice saying that, oh, here is the rule, first of all, that I would like to fit to. And then there's also a choice maker, which says randomly generated something. Is it the same? Is it fitting this? No, then throw it away. So two things are happening in there. First of all, there's this fit criteria.
You need to see the bigger picture to design this field.
The second thing is you compare it to that fit criteria and discard it. You make a choice. So this is not as simple as saying that it just happens. And there, two things are happening. Knowledge and will is at play, actually.
Plus power, because
And
it's
power
executive.
is running. So knowledge, power, will is at play. And this knowledge is now an all-encompassing knowledge, because you are trying to fit, like in the case of natural selection and whatnot, something that fits the purpose of the whole existence in terms of, if you call it life. And then, so all-encompassing knowledge, the power needs to be making, because same power is acting here and acting in the same choices being made in the other side of the continent as well. And will as well. It's an all-encompassing will, because this will being applied in here is not being interfered by another choice being made elsewhere. Does whatever you come up with, natural law, does it own all-encompassing knowledge, all-encompassing power, all-encompassing will? Will, power, knowledge is at play. But this is being covered up by a two-word natural selection. And we fall for it without realizing behind that ideology, what are the assumptions? The assumption is there's already a common knowledge. Like, of course, if you drop something, it has to fall. I mean, this is an objective function, what did you say, fit criteria. Why is this a fit criteria? I mean, why should it fall down? Who said this? So these are the type of things that we never question, that are being swept under the carpet when such huge claims are being made. And it's just two words, natural selection. And it applies everywhere. This is why in such a simple language, in this text, the author is challenging a huge thing. And as if the author is mocking all those philosophies, saying that, look, what you are claiming is as absurd as here, what's going on in here. And I'm going to explain it to you in the dumbest possible level that you can understand. You can use fancy jargons to say that, oh, well, Yusuf, you're dumbing it down too much. Natural selection has this and this and that. Doesn't change really. No matter how much jargon you put into there, this is all what's going on here.
So you were previously discussing thoughts. So I have a question about that. I don't know if it relates with qadar or willpower, but I believe that we have control over our thoughts. For example, the dream thing.
Slow with this, because I really had a tough day today. So you really think we have control over our thoughts? Okay.
Yes. Okay. So for example, there's this study that for the dreams, what you were thinking right before you were going to sleep, it's most likely that you dream about that. It's like 80 or 70%, something like that. People dream about what they were thinking right before they went to sleep. For example, you're outside, you see a beautiful tree. You see the beautiful tree and then you think it's a beautiful tree. You don't just walk around and then think like it's a beautiful tree. You can control that thought in your mind. So how do you say that thoughts are not in your control? Like you can say if that child is a mercy of God or that child is just being mischievous, like he's just messing around.
Can I make a quick point to that? Well, I guess first of all, I would have to disagree that I don't know if I'm just an exception to this scientific study, but I definitely dream about really random things that sometimes I just can't explain. Like this was nowhere in my thought, like in that same day or even that same week. And I'm like, oh, this is such a weird dream. Like I can't even rationalize like why I would dream this. And I guess another thing is if I did have control over my thoughts or dreams or whatever, then if there's a dream that I wake up and I forget all the events of it, Like, why am I not able to, why can I remember some dreams, but not others? Like,
It's when you just wake up, try to remember the dream, and then you remember the dream. It's
I
okay.
So the study goes that when you just wake up, you remember what you went through in the dream and you remember it. If it's like after 10-20 minutes, then you don't remember most of it. But when you just wake up and re-go through that dream, you remember most of it. That's why I said if it's Qadr, like, we
this
can
is
leave
just
it.
going to totally derail the
Yeah.
conversation because it's not about you controlling anything yet. It's about what controls the particle. It didn't really come to humans' actions or anything, because this is going to eventually become the big picture. But right now, the way, let's say, we are talking about the universe and whatever, we say natural laws govern. We say chances, there's chance at play. We say causes have, and I mean, individually, we talked about this when we were talking about La ilaha illallah part, but this is our understanding. So now the author is saying that not only they cannot govern, they cannot even meddle their finger. They cannot have any partnership, any share in the existence. So this is the main picture. So this is why also in our conversation, I mean, guys keep asking questions about Qadar, for example, and I said, let's discuss it at the end, because this is where human agency is coming into the picture, and it's going to be challenging. It's not that easy because of the intuition and whatnot, as Azar is saying. But the main point here is, how about the particle? And this is really where the whole materialism is starting from. Can I explain anything in here with what materialism or this worldview we have claims to be doing? Let's get done with this. Then we will get back to how about my thoughts? How about my apparent agency, feeling of agency? That is it real, or is it a, let's say, what do they say? Illusion. So that would be a secondary question. But if we get there, I think we'll lose it totally.
So going back to natural selection, like we've all studied the giraffe example, like there were tall neck giraffes and short neck giraffes, and then eventually there was less grass on the ground, and then due to evolutionary pressures, the short neck giraffes died, and eventually only the long neck survived. So how do I not attribute that to natural selection? For example, so it's obvious because the short neck giraffes can only eat the grass, they can't reach the trees up high.
The giraffes that cannot eat die.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, we keep talking about like order in the universe. So that means that there are laws that, Allah has placed, like the law of gravity, the law of whatever.
Forbidden word for now.
But the thing that we need to realize that is that the laws aren't the reason why those things are happening. So it's like just how we talked about how like God creates creatures or animate objects with an index of commands does not mean that those commands are why those like creatures act those way. It's Allah who makes them act according to that index, and he has chosen that differently for different people. So that doesn't really, like, the order isn't the cause. That's just his like will and his like order at work.
So every Friday, I keep remembering these ayahs about Fir'aun and Musa alayhi salam. So I always, previously, I've been always taking the word magicians. It's just, at that time there were magicians. Now we don't have magicians and so on. But every time, when I keep thinking about it, I really love, such an elegant way to describe something in Quran. I really respect, my respect grows, because what we have at hand today as well It's just like really a magic trick. Because as we said before, the magicians work by showing you something and you think that it's about that thing. Like they would, for instance, show you one thing in their hand, and action actually happens in their other hand, right? They will show you something, you will look at it, and they will explain you something, and then other hand does something, right? The important thing, and you miss it because you don't look at there, because they want you to look at the other hand. Exactly same thing happens when it comes to these kind of discussions like natural selection, the movements of the particles. That doesn't matter. When they use an author, every time I read this text, I love this. In the language of naturalism and philosophy, saying that they will never speak in an ordinary man's language because they have to attract your attention to somewhere so that the other hand will hide something. So when you say, for instance, natural selection, or when you say the particle moves, the question is, okay, my attention is attracted there because it's really, let's say fancy talk about that. Like the natural selection, giraffes, short giraffes, tall giraffes, eating or being obese and so on and so forth. Your mind occupied there. But the other hand is hiding something. There is a will at place. There is a power because it's an action. Whether it happens this way or that way, doesn't matter. It happens. How it happens, like what is the distinction between, what is the difference between existence and non-existence? There's a power in place. Make it exist. Make it happen this way. There is knowledge in play, right? When you say the tall giraffe, the short giraffes eating, there are a lot of knowledge overloaded there. We'll not even talk about that. The relationship between eating, being tall, or dying or not dying, all these things that we know about the biology and everything is being taken granted. It's being hidden somewhere. Nobody talks about them. So you always have to look at the other hand, what it is hiding. So one particle, and I really we have to appreciate this. I think without appreciating this, we will miss something. Why this author always, not only here, he always talk about the particles' movements, the very fundamental thing. And we think there's no question there. The particle moves. How? According to Newton's law, right? It is very clear in our minds. Author challenges this. So he knows about the evolution and so on, so he doesn't even talk about it. Because, when you talk about the evolution, biology, whatever, you will talk about the probabilities, as Kadir was saying, 70%, 80%. Author says, forget about that. I will talk to you about something 100% accurate, which is Newton's laws. I'm denying them, he says. What evolution are you talking about? I'm challenging the Newton's laws. So one particle moves. What is saying? I'm asking, how a particle, forget about how it interacts with other things and so on and so forth. What we do, I'm asking him to question, how a particle moves. We don't even have this question. We say, what are you talking about? According to Newton's laws, everybody knows, right? If you don't apply force, particle does what? Stay in motion. What it means? It moves itself. It doesn't need anything. It doesn't need force. It doesn't need intervention to move, it means. In force is only required to what? To change the acceleration. Not the speed, acceleration. What it means? To move, you don't need anything. Only to change your movement, you need something, it says. Author says, what are you talking about? How you move? You need power to move. You need knowledge to move. Even if you try to think about, as Yusuf says, The isolated movement, you cannot. How are you going to explain the space that it occupies? And it is always occupied by other particles as well. They have to move. How do you explain this? The other hand hiding this. Yes, it is true. When I look, it looks like it's moving without any force. If it's in a vacuum, if I observe, I agree, that's what I see. I agree what I see can be formulated. What I see can be formulated according to F equals to M plus multiplied by A, whatever. We're not denying that. What I see is that, but it does not explain how. It's just a description. And I agree with that. But how it moves? Zara says, intuitive. It's just moves. Like when we say intuitive, there's no such thing as intuitive from birth. Most of the things that we think intuitive, it's intuitive after we are educated. All these years, you were taught to think in a certain way. When a particle moves, you don't question. This is your intuition now. Particle moves like, intuitively, you need force just to change the speed. Before Newton, for instance, like, the reason to details, but people thought the force was related, like a force related to speed, not to acceleration. It was not intuitive for them. It is intuitive for you because you were, educated this way. So anyway, like forget about, the 70%, 80%, evolution, natural selection, whatever. What is just a movement of the particle? 100%. It always happened in a certain way. You cannot explain this, author says. Knowledge, will, power, everything is hidden. How are you going to explain this?
And then in this regard, I told natural selection, but natural selection is just an example of any law, any, if you like, rule that we think is at play. Replace it with gravity. Same idea. Why is it happening this way, not that way? Because it's a specific choice. Like in the case of natural selection, we imagine there is a certain set of rules or environment which nurtures life. If the being fits into that criteria, we will let it live. If it doesn't fit that criteria, it will die. In the case of gravity, we say it drops this way, it doesn't drop that way. Like this is a rule. There's a choice being made because there could be multiple other or infinitely many different rules that to be set. So why is it this way and not that way? There's a choice. What makes the choice is the question. This is what the author is challenging. This part is being hidden. Choice maker. Is the choice maker the thing itself? Is the choice maker nature? What is that? Just he's trying to find an answer because the choice is being made. That's clear. Like hydrogen and oxygen comes together, they don't become helium, but they become water. So there's a choice being made, which is another rule like natural selection. Natural selection is supposedly a law. Hydrogen and oxygen coming together and becoming water is another law, right? So why hydrogen and oxygen comes together and not become helium or xelium, whatever, I mean, just made up name, but it becomes that specific thing. It's the choice. The choice is being made. What makes that choice? Author is asking, if you are saying that, let's say, nature makes this choice, author says, explain it, because whatever that makes the choice is able to fulfill these three qualities. I can work wherever I go, I can work properly. I work in collaboration with other particles, and I become part of compounds, and still in there, that compound functions as well. Like it's not that particles moves like this and it does the job, but within the compound is also fulfilling a different job. What does that mean? Like imagine you're just a soldier. And as a soldier, there is a smaller subgroup, let's say 10 soldiers makes a, I don't know, team. Only what you know is taking the trigger. So within your 10 people team, you're taking the trigger, but that team is also part of a different larger army, and that team does a specific job within the army as well. So relative to the larger army, you are also doing something more than just taking the trigger. Does this make sense? Like in the larger scale, as you get more compounded, you are assuming a different role. Anyways, this it looks like people's attention gets scattered. Zainab is jumping too much.
So I have a question about how do we establish that there is a choice? So for example, let's just say we imagine a road and I can turn to the right or I can turn to the left. And we see two options, and I can confirm by turning to the right and to the left, there are two options. But I wouldn't say that the question of choice arises when the road just goes straight, So for example, in terms of hydrogen and oxygen, the only thing that we've ever observed happening is water, nothing else. Every time hydrogen reacts to oxygen, water is happening. So how do we confirm that it is a choice? Because for a choice, there has to be other options. And those other options need to be confirmed that this could have happened, but it does not happen.
So at least there's the choice of being or not being. It's always being. I mean, the choice of non-existence is always there. Why does it always exist? Because it was not existing the moment before. And you know that it was a viable option. Hydrogen was there, oxygen was there, and there was no water. And now there is water. At least from non-existence to existence, the option is there. And you are very much aware of the presence of that choice being made. And like in general, this is like that statement that I made had been in depth discussed. What the existence is a choice. The existence is a choice being made, because a thing could exist, could not exist. A zarar could have existed, might not have existed because there had been no zarar before you. So a choice is being made at that moment, at that specific moment, for that specific case, hydrogen on oxygen, because this is a new hydrogen on oxygen. It's not the same oxygen as somewhere else. That hydrogen and that oxygen are right now here, and a new water is being formed, whatever. That choice is being made over here. A new thing become existing, which was not existent the moment before. A choice of being made. What makes that choice? This is for the derivatives in can, the possibility for contingencies.
And also the entire universe, actually, like when you look at some formal studies, not only again the Islamic literature, but the universe itself is called the realm of contingencies. But I guess like one intuitive example would be the fact that we always ask the question, how? Like, for instance, when we see that a flower flourishes, like I put a seed, I put some water, and then comes the flower. As a human being, I don't say that this is the fact. You put seed, it comes flower. We don't say that, right? We say, how? Why? We ask these questions. Because whatever we see, we know that it is an optional thing. It doesn't need to be that way. Just because every time we observe it, we do not automatically say that this is the fact, so there is no reason to explore it. We say, let's look at what happens in seed, how it interacts with water and so on. What I'm saying, the fact that there are sciences is a proof that we see the universe as full of possibilities and contingencies, choices. Otherwise, we wouldn't explore it. We wouldn't say, how? Why this happened? This is what we see. Why do you question? Why anybody studies what happens in the seed? Why anybody study biology? This is what we see. You have a intercourse and you have baby. There's no magic there. There's no surprising, there's no surprise there. This is what you observe. Yeah, why don't you just simply say it has to happen? This is what you observe. You ask, how? What happens there? What about these cells? What about these, whatever? You're trying to explain. Just this fact that you're trying to explain something means it deserves to be explained. Means there's a missing part there that I cannot explain. Means there's a choice there being made. We don't name it this way. Again, hidden there. It's not being mentioned. But the fact that you explore is the proof of that there's a choice. Otherwise, you wouldn't explore. There's nothing to explore.
That point that you made about having multiple choices, I think it also applies about the thing that you talked about, Newton's law and everything. The way Newton discovered his law was under very restrictive set of conditions. He basically saw an apple, right? It fell off. But what were the conditions? The object was of certain size, and the speed at which the object moved was certain, right? Like it wasn't too big, nor too small. But when you study physics, if you change the scale of the object, for example, if you go very, very down to the scale of atoms or molecules, there you have quantum mechanics. If you increase the speed, like very, very big, to make it big relative to the speed of light, then you have special relativity. If you increase the size of the object, then you have general relativity. And if you consider interactions at a very, very small level between different fields, then you have quantum field theory. And even to this day, like physicists don't still have a reconciliation of how to obtain like quantum field theory from GR, from classical mechanics and everything. So in that sense, you have choices. And I think, not having that unified law just yet, it kind of, says something about the nature as well, about the laws of the nature. Yeah, just the point. Yeah.
Can I say something about that? Like, I really appreciate, and I totally agree with Sultan said, but I usually have this reluctance about talking about these uncertainties, how physicists cannot explain this or that, because it sounds like as if, we need the idea of God, or when we have these gaps, when somebody cannot explain it. So that's the reason I always choose to assume that, let's assume Newton's laws are the only laws, and let's assume they work 100%. Let's assume that doesn't change anything. So it's not about the uncertainty. It's not about, the not knowing this part or that part. It's not about how different laws at different, the levels, which is true. It adds even more dimensions to these, the explanations and so on. But even if you look at just a movement of a single particle and assume what is written there in your textbook is 100% true. Let's assume that. Does it change anything? Does it change the fact that you have this comprehensive knowledge in place? Does it change the fact that there's a choice there? Power? It won't. So that's the reason I always stick to, very simple things. Everybody knows Newton's physics. So let's stick to that. Everybody knows the movement of a particle. And that's another beauty. Like author doesn't say leptons or electrons or whatever, quarks. Doesn't, just particle, whatever particle means for you. For a layman person, a particle would mean a dust. Let's explain dust. For Zarar, it would mean electron. For Sultan, it would mean, what is beyond electron. Doesn't matter. Just assume it's 100% true. Oh.
Yes. I don't really know the the concluding dua, so
Okay.
I will pass that on to either you or Birkan.
So, inshallah, let's conclude here then for today, as we are 12 minutes over time. So we will continue from the footnote next week, inshallah. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم وآخر دعواهم أن الحمد لله رب العالمين.